All right, here we are at stage 20 of Cambridge Latin. It is the last stage of book two of the Cambridge Latin series, and it's titled Medicus, which means doctor. It's still set in Egypt, and we'll see and learn a little bit about some of the medical practices of the ancient world, especially those practiced in Egypt, which is really where the medical arts originated. And they had absolutely fantastic medical skills, the best of the ancient world. So we'll look into that a little bit as we translate each of these. And I very much suggest that everyone reads the culture section for this stage because it's quite interesting. Alrighty. So before we get into the model sentences for the stage, we have to go through a little bit of grammar. And it's not fully the grammar that is explained in this stage. It's more than that. I'm giving you grammar that you will learn later on in the Cambridge Latin series, but I'm front loading that grammar so that you understand what's going on with what is being introduced. So the things that are being introduced, well, there's only one thing that is properly speaking being introduced, and that is the present active participles. Now, in order to explain this, I also have to explain the other participles which they're informally using, and that is the perfect passive participles. So we're going to go through, first of all, what it means to have a active voice verb and a passive voice verb. And then we're going to go through and talk about what it means to have a participle. Now, also in terms of the grammar of this stage and what's in the book, is you'll see that you are finally getting the full chart for the demonstrative pronoun is, a, id. Now, since we've already gone through this in a previous stage, I'm not going to review that. You can go back to the stage that we went through that, or just look in the book for that full chart. So, first thing first, let's talk about verbal voice. Now, verbs in English and in Latin and in general verbal systems can have an active or passive voice. Now, what this means is, what this describes is whether the subject of the verb is the doer or the receiver of the action. So up to now, we've only seen verbs in which the subject, that is to say the thing, the verb that takes a nominative case noun, the nominative case will be the doer of the action, right? So right down here on the left side, we see these are active verbs. You're used to these. These are the endings that we have. So amo, amas, amat, amamus, amatus, amant, right? So ost, mustis, nit, used to those endings. Those respectively mean I love, you love, he, she, it loves, we love, you all love, and they love. All right. So the subject of that is the one doing the action of loving. Whereas on the other side here, we have passive verbs. So the subject of this, if you put a nominative noun in front of amor, it means that that subject is not doing the action of loving, but is actually receiving the action of loving. So they're being loved. Now, you don't need to remember these endings right now. They'll be introduced in a few stages, but when you do get them, then you'll have to remember them. So I'm just going to give them to you here. Just going to put it here so that when you do learn them, it's not completely new information. And it's restor, mini entor. And you can see from all of these that we have a verbal stem. And the verbal stem for the verb ama is, or for amo is ama. And we'll use this in all formation of verbs that are in what's called the present system. There's a different stem for the perfect system. So for example, amawi uses a different stem, the one that has that V infix in it. So let's go ahead and break down a little bit more. So active voice means the subject does the action of the verb, whereas passive voice means that the subject receives the action of the verb. Now, active verbs usually take a direct object in the accusative. There's a few exceptions, for example, special verbs that will take dative direct objects like fabio or credeo, and a few other verbs that will take an ablative. So for example, the verb utor, to use. Now let's have an example here. Julius salam pulsat. So Julius punches Sala. So we can translate pulsat as punches or is punching. So Julius is the one doing the action of punching, and the one receiving that action is Sala. Now in passive voice, passive verbs cannot take direct objects. It is mainly because the action is already being done to the subject. So it wouldn't make sense for that action to be expressed on an accusative because the action is already being expressed on the nominative. Now, what is missing from this is the doer of the action. You no longer are going to have a nominative case noun doing the action. So what you're instead going to do is you're going to express that action using a ablative or an ablative, usually with a form of a or ob in front of it. And this is called an ablative of agent. So in the sentence, Julius a Sulla pulsator, it means Julius is punched by Sulla. So over here in this first sentence, Julius is the one doing the punching, and the one who's receiving the punching is Sulla. In this other sentence, Julius is the one receiving the punch, and he's receiving the punch from Sulla. Sulla is the one doing the action of punching. But since Julius is in the nominative and Julius is receiving the action, we have to shift the origin of that action into the ablative case, right? And that's why we have this ablative agent here of a Sulla. So we're not going to see any indicative passive verbs for a while, but we are going to see a participle that is in the passive voice, and that is called the perfect passive participle. So let's go on and talk about participles. So participles are verbal adjectives, and this is like that friend you have that is in two separate friend groups. Your friend group, let's just say that you're the verbs, you're the doers, and it's part of the other friend group, which is the adjectives. They're the ones that are the ones that just kind of are, they exist. So since it lives in two worlds, it does a lot of double duty. So it, for example, has all of the things that a noun has. It has a person, it has all the things that a noun has, and that is it has case, number, and gender. So a participle will express whether it is singular or plural, whether it's masculine, feminine, or neuter, and whether it is a nominative, accusative, genitive, any of those things that a noun does. But because it's a verb, it will also have things such as it'll have tense, and it'll be active or passive. So it'll express whether something is happening now, or whether it happens in the future, or whether it happened in the past. Now we're only going to learn two types of participles. Even though there's 6 verbal tenses, there's only 4 participles. So it makes it fairly simple, right? The 4 participles are present active participles, there's a future active participle, there's a perfect passive participle, and then there's a future passive participle. Now, we're not going to learn the 2 future participles yet. We're going to learn those in the future, even though there is, in fact, one future active participle that is used in one of the translations of this stage. But for now, just know that the one that you have to learn for this stage is a present active participle. And the one that they use in this stage, but you don't have to technically learn yet, is called a perfect passive participle. Now, an active participle is one that expresses an action that is happening at the same time as the action of the verb, the main verb of the sentence. And it is describing a noun in that sentence. So the man saw is the main action here. So the man saw. What did he see? He saw a horse. So he saw the horse in the past tense. And we're going to describe that horse. What is the horse doing at the same time as the man saw that horse? And he saw the horse running. So the action of running is describing that horse, that equum. Okay? So he saw the horse. The man saw the horse. And what was the horse doing? The horse was running. And the horse was actively running at the same time as the man saw it. And this is why this is called a present active participle, because it's expressing the action present to the time of the main verb. Now, we notice that the horse, this is an active participle because the horse is the one doing the running, right? So the horse is actively engaged in the action of running. Now, let's look over here and see what happens when we shift the participle into both the past and we shift it into a passive voice. So the man saw is still the core of the sentence. This the same main action is happening of the man seeing, perfect tense verb. So the man saw. Now, what did he see? He saw a different man. He saw a man. So the man saw a man. Actually, this is translated incorrectly. It should be serwum. If we're going to have this slave. So then the man saw another man, captum, having been captured. So the man that he saw received the action of being captured prior to seeing him. So the man saw a man, and that man was captured, and he was captured before that first man saw him. Okay, so this is happening prior to the action of the sentence, and this adjective, this captum, is the action is happening to the noun that it's describing. So this captum is an adjective describing the man, but the man is receiving the action of having been captured. So you would describe it as the man saw the captured man. Or more specifically, if you want to be really precise, you describe it or you translate it as the man saw the man having been captured. All right. Now, let's add another degree of complexity to this. Because participles are verbal adjectives, it means that they can take, as a verb, they can take a direct object, they can take adverbs, they can take prepositional phrases, they can take anything that modifies them in the same way that a verb is modified, and an ordinary indicative verb is modified. So we see in this sentence here, vidimus Herculum vinum bebentum. So the main core of the sentence is vidimus, we see, or sorry, we saw. Now, what is the thing that we saw? We saw Herculum, we saw Hercules. So the direct object of seeing is Hercules. Now we're going to describe Hercules. We're going to describe Hercules with this adjective, bebentum. It's a present active adjective. So we saw Hercules, and what was he doing while we saw him? We saw him drinking. Okay, so he was doing the action of drinking at the same time as when we saw him. So it was a present action in the past. So we saw Hercules drinking. Now, bebentum is describing Hercules, but it's taking a direct object. So it's taking vinum. So what is he drinking? He's drinking wine. So the direct object of bebentum is vinum. So Herculum is the direct object of vidimus, which is why it's an accusative. And it is being described by the adjective bebentum. And because all adjectives have to match in case, number, and gender, it is the same case, number, and gender as Herculum. So he is Hercules, which Hercules, the one that is drinking, and it is taking the direct object vinum. Vinum is in the accusative, not because it matches, not because it's trying to match with the case of bebentum and Herculum, but because it's the direct object of a verb. All right. Now, next thing, if this were a perfect passive participle, it could not take a direct object, but it could take an ablative of agent. So the wine having been drunk by Hercules, for example. You could do that, but we don't have to worry about that just yet. That's something that we'll explain in the future. All righty. So that is that. Hopefully that has explained verbal adjectives to you. If you're in doubt, when you think about this, just try and imagine any noun that you have. So you can just come up with, for example, the phone, and then come up with an action that you want to describe that phone. So it can be as silly as you want. So let's just say running, or so to run, the verb to run. Now you can describe the verb, that verb as an adjective by adding an ing to it. So instead of to run, it is running. And so what kind of phone is it? It is a running phone. What if you wanted to say the verb to hide? So take hide, add an ing into it, so hiding. So what kind of phone is it? It's a hiding phone. Let's just say you wanted to say dog. What kind of dog is it? It's a hiding dog. It is a running dog. It is a sleeping dog. It is an eating dog. It is a barking dog. All of those are verbal adjectives that are describing the noun dog. All right. Hopefully this isn't too complex. I know that introducing participles is always a little bit confusing. It's a little bit weird, but you'll get used to them. Just remember to think of them both as verbs and as adjectives. Now, last but not least, We've got to talk about how these are formed. Now, what you have to do, remember we saw the stem of the verb amo is ama. So you're going to take that stem and you're going to use it to form both the present active participle and the perfect passive participle. Both of them use that present stem. Now, what you need to do is you need to take that stem, ama, for the present active, and then you need to add third declension endings to them. So third declension endings, all four I stem endings, and we can tell because of the genitive singular, so it's amantium instead of amantorum. So third declension endings, and you have to add a little bit of an infix. You've got to add this n and nt infix for them. This is the same as if you had the verb clement, or not the verb, the noun clemens. Right? So if you imagine the noun clemens, that's a third declension noun, and it ends in an n. So clemens, just like amans, and then that's the nominative form. In the genitive form, it's clementis, clementi, clementem, clemente, clementes, clementium, clementibus, clementes, clementibus, right? It's the same form as clemens. You add those endings that are the clemens endings, the third declension endings that you use for a noun that has an n in it, and then you add that to the verbal stem. So amans, amantis, amanti, amantem, amante, amantes, amantium, amantibus, amantes, amantibus. Now, here's the other thing. So the forms that we have there, that are the first ones, are if the noun that is modifying are feminine or masculine. If it is neuter, then you have to use the neuter forms, which is amans, amans, and amantia, amantia. This, the amanti ablative form is just an alternate ablative form. It doesn't mean that it's neuter inherently. Now, over here, in terms of the perfect passive participle, it's very similar. You take that same ama stem, and then you just add, very simple, add a t, and then the first or second declension endings. So it's amat, a, or amatus, amatai, amati, amatai, amato, amatam, amatum, amato, amato, amatai, amati, amataram, amatorum, amatis, amatas, amatos, amatis. I did not add here the neuter forms of those, which would be good to know. It would be like amatum, amatum here, and then amata, amata. So remember that neuter singulars or neuter plurals have a short a ending. Very, very simple. This, remember, means loving. So this was, so for example, the man loving. And this right here is the man having been loved, or the woman having been loved. Super, super easy. Now, let's go through the model sentences very quickly so that we can see these in practice. All righty. So this first sentence is the slaves returned to the house carrying Barbilus. So portantes is a present active participle that is describing the slaves. The slaves, what kind of slaves are they? They're the slaves carrying Barbilus. All right. Now notice that portantes is taking barbilum as a direct object. So the slaves, what slaves? The slaves carrying what? The slaves carrying Barbilus. All right. Ancillae prope lectum stabant lacrimantes. So the slave girls, the maids, were standing near the bed crying. So the slave girls are being described as what kind of slave girls? The crying slave girls. They're doing the action of crying. All righty. Notice that there's no direct object to that. Astrologus in cubiculum erupit clamans. The astrologer burst into the bedroom shouting. All right, so this is, notice that this clamans is describing astrologus. The astrologus is a second declension noun, and it is being described by this third declension verbal adjective. It's a singular, just like over here. These are third declension endings, modifying the second declension noun, first declension noun, second declension noun, third declension ending, right? So remember, we've learned this before, third declension adjectives can describe second declension nouns and vice versa. All right. Barbilus in lecto recubens astrologum audiit. So Barbilus, reclining in the bed, heard the astrologer. So we're describing Barbilus as which Barbilus is it? It's the Barbilus that is lying in bed. And this participle is taking a participial phrase, or a prepositional phrase. It's describing where he's lying. So Barbilus, lying in bed, heard the astrologer. Formio ad urbem contendit medicum quaerens. So Formio hurried to the city seeking or looking for a doctor. So what Formio is it? It's the Formio who is seeking. And what is he seeking? He's seeking the direct object of the medicum. So this present active participle is taking the direct object medicum. Also notice that Formio is a third declension noun, but it's not the same type of third declension noun. And they're both nominative, which is why quaerens is modifying or describing Formio. Alrighty. As you can see that our translations for this stage are going to be a little bit longer. That's okay. So that means the videos are going to be a little bit longer. I'm going to try and get through them as quickly as possible. But unfortunately, sometimes the videos are going to be a little bit longer for stage 20. Anyhow, let's go forward on this last stage for the last stage of book 2.